Western diplomats were scrambling over the weekend to prevent a surge of fighting along the Israel-Lebanon border. This after a rocket fire from Lebanon on Saturday killed at least 12 people in an Israeli-controlled town, most of them children. The rocket prompted Israel to retaliate quickly with strikes across southern Lebanon. The initial Israeli response appeared to stop short of any kind of major escalation, but there were still fears that the fallout from the rocket attacks would lead to all-out war between Israel and Hezbollah. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is facing domestic pressure to mount a much more robust response. Netanyahu met with senior ministers and security officials to discuss further steps after he cut short a trip to the United States and flew back early. Israel immediately blamed Hezbollah, which is an Iran-backed Lebanese terrorist group which has been attacking Israel in solidarity with Hamas. The deadly rocket attack on Saturday happened in the Druze Arab town of Majd al-Shams. Hezbollah has denied that it was responsible for the rocket attack. US diplomats were working on Sunday to try and contain the hostilities and asked the government in Lebanon to relay a message to Hezbollah to show restraint in the face of a further Israeli response. US officials are convinced that the rocket was made in Iran and it was launched from territory controlled by Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. They say there is no way that Hezbollah can deny its role in this attack. French officials too have passed on messages back and forth between Israel and Hezbollah. France still has some degree of influence in Lebanon because of its former status as a French protectorate after World War I. The back-channel diplomacy came amid threats from both Israel and Iran. The Iranian Foreign Ministry warned Israel of unforeseen consequences if there were to be any major Israeli escalation. On the other side, in Israel, there is ramped up pressure on Netanyahu to strike more decisively. Israel's education minister, Yoav Kitch, called for a strong response even if that means entering into an all-out war. The Israeli military said that the strikes had chiefly targeted places in Lebanon that it had often hit in the past, most of them very close to the border between Lebanon and Israel. There was also reportedly one strike in what is called the Bekaa Valley, that's about 60 miles north of the Israel-Lebanon border, where there have been frequent strikes over the last 8 or 9 months since this war began. Lebanon's state-run news agency reported extensive damage and some casualties resulting from the Israeli strikes. The strikes from Israel began shortly after midnight and lasted all the way until Monday dawn. It was not immediately clear if the casualties in Lebanon were all civilians or whether there were terrorists in there as well. The rocket strike launched from Hezbollah-controlled Lebanon on Saturday hit a children's football field. It was the deadliest assault on Israeli-controlled territory since Israel and Hezbollah began exchanging missile and rocket fire from October at the start of the Israel war on Hamas. Some Israelis want Netanyahu to authorize a full-scale ground invasion of southern Lebanon in order to deter any similar attacks in the future. But others fear that such a move would prompt a far more devastating response from Hezbollah. Hezbollah has an arsenal of weapons which is larger and more sophisticated than almost any other non-state actor in the region. Israeli commanders are also wary of opening up a second major war while the war in Gaza is still raging on. After 9 months of fighting with Hamas and Hezbollah, Israel's ammunition stockpiles have also dwindled, and that has raised questions about how intense a battle it could fight against Lebanon. The health ministry in Gaza, meanwhile, has said that more than 38,000 Palestinians have died, while the top leadership of Hamas still has managed to get away scot-free. For now, Israeli officials say that they're still open to a diplomatic resolution to the conflict with Hezbollah. Still, there were strong expectations that Israel might mount a much bigger response. That, analysts fear, could tip the low-level hostilities we've seen so far between Israel and Hezbollah militias into a much more intense conflict. And if that were to happen, that would straight away put pressure on the new Iranian regime under a reformist president, Pezeshkian. Roughly 100,000 people in Lebanon and 60,000 in Israel have been displaced. Scores of schools and health centers have been shut in both countries. More than 450 people in Lebanon have been killed. Many of them happen to be militias associated with Hezbollah. More than 100 were also civilians, including 12 children and 20 health workers, according to the United Nations and Lebanon's health ministry. The fighting has killed 24 Israeli soldiers and a similar number of civilians, according to figures made available by the Israeli government. The attack on Saturday set off widespread grief and anguish in the Golan Heights, where thousands of Druze Arabs observed a day of mourning on Sunday. They shut their shops and other workplaces. Schools were shut as well. Thousands went by bus to Majdal Shams, which is the small town where the attack happened over the weekend. They attended the funerals of those children who were killed. The Golan Heights is territory that was once held by Syria but was captured by Israel during the Arab-Israeli War of 1967. Israel annexed that territory in 1981. It's a move that has not been recognized by most of the world. Decades later, then US President Donald Trump recognized Israeli sovereignty at the Golan Heights, but most other countries, including countries in Europe, consider the Golan Heights as an occupied territory. Roughly 20,000 Druze Arabs live in the Golan Heights, including in the town that was hit by the rocket. Some of them still consider themselves to be Syrian. They have refused Israeli passports, while a minority have taken up Israeli citizenship. Jewish Israelis began settling in the Golan Heights, this disputed territory, after 1967, and more than 20,000 Israeli Jews now live in resettled parts of the Golan Heights. Saturday's attack once again throws light to all those areas which other countries in the region have long accused Israel of being in occupation of. It's not just Gaza or West Bank, but now there are renewed concerns about places like the Golan Heights, the attack on Saturday underscoring that point.